This is the Situation Room. Ndu and Joe with you today, and we're getting into things this morning. Thank you for being here with us across our platforms on Facebook, YouTube, and on X. Thank you for joining us on that digital area of things. And our audience tuned in on KTN Karibuni Sana. As you tuned in on terrestrial radio around the country, then getting into parts of the region and the world, we'll have this conversation this morning, as we always do. And we thank you for keeping it here with us. So, of course, political action activities took place from Friday well into the weekend, and the many questions abound in terms of, all right, so what next? Is there staying power here? Is there a split? I mean, for crying out loud, we should be able to see what it is by now. And Alfred Omenya is here with us this morning and joins us in his capacity as a governance expert. Prof, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Very well. How are you people?
Very well, thank you.
Excellent.
Good to see you.
Yeah, same here.
If you were shown a picture before we get to our proverb, perhaps this would give an allusion into our conversation. If you were shown a picture of an animal in the bush that had a long neck, long eyelashes, two little horns, and was reticulated, if you were shown this picture, what would you imagine it was?
What sort of an animal is that? An animal
with a long neck, long eyelashes,
short horns,
little horns, long legs.
Yes.
What would you imagine it was? You were shown this picture, you can see it. What animal could it be?
I would think it's a version of a giraffe.
Something like that, right? Yeah. But let me tell you, Kenya's politics, you could be looking at the thing, but you're told it's something else.
I see. That is true.
It's never what it looks like.
It never is.
That is very. I agree 100%.
It never really is what it looks like.
This reminds me of the late Odongo Mamo describing a pothole in Kenya, and he was saying that it's a small hole where you can fit a pot. Or a goat, but he was saying that he saw one on Thika Road, and he went to rescue a goat, only to find a giraffe.
There's that giraffe again.
Right.
So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
In Kenya, it never really is what it seems like.
And that question has some relevance. We'll get into it in just a little bit. Professor Peter Kagwanja will be in the seat in a minute, but maybe he can tell us if the picture that he sees is a giraffe or if it's something else. We'll be having that conversation in just a bit. Our proverbs take us to South Africa this week. And it's just lovely to then be able to get into the feel of what freedom and Ubuntu actually is. Today's proverb is one that I'd love to get to hear from both of you about. Professor Peter Kagwanja, good morning.
Good morning.
You're well?
I'm very well, thank you.
That's good. It's kind of like a statement of establishment and hope. You're well?
Yes, I am. Good. But culturally, you don't say anything else other than well.
Yes, of course. Even if the world is crumbling.
Then you can qualify. Yes.
Isn't it?
That's what we are taught.
All right, so maybe we can get into today's proverb from South Africa, and this is what it says. The wind does not break a tree that can bend. The wind does not break a tree that can bend. We'll start with you, Prof. Omenya.
Yeah, I think it is about, and this reminds me, I saw a very interesting tree whose branches and leaves were on one side.
Yeah.
It was on the coast of Australia, where the wind was actually very strong.
Yeah.
And I think it illustrates a proverb perfectly that the tree has adapted actually to the wind. And the tree continues growing. And this is the rigid tree that doesn't adapt, that the wind breaks. But otherwise, the one that bends, it swings with the wind, it comes back, it enjoys it. Like the Australian one, it can even change its shape.
Indeed.
But continues growing. Exactly. So it is. I think it tells us about flexibility.
Yes.
It tells us about flexibility that as a society, as individuals, as corporations, and so on, we need to sometimes align with these forces that if you don't align to, then ends up destroying you.
Kabisa. Prof. Kagwanja?
Yeah, I agree with him. It is all about flexibility. It's about resilience. It's about adaptability. Then survival is guaranteed. That's it. Otherwise, if you are not, then you break. It's similar to the to the proverb that talk about the branches that are tough or dry branches. You can't bend them because they'll break.
Yeah.
Correct.
But a soft one, you just bend it and it will go
into the shape in which
I think Kenya is a very resilient and flexible society.
Correct.
Without that flexibility, I don't think we'd have reached here.
Correct.
There's a lot of
broken.
bedding.
That is true.
Like
A long time ago.
Like most of our neighbors.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, but one wonders whether that flexibility should have a limit.
Yeah.
Correct. Very, very true.
There's a sense in which we take too much of this, baggage.
Correct.
Yeah, and allow ourselves to institute a culture of impunity in a huge way. So the balance is necessary between flexibility and a principled lifestyle.
Correct.
completely. All right. Well, let's look into this conversation, because the Politico, essentially, from Friday, kind of took a lot of expectation from many people versed in the country's politics. And some of the questions that I heard, the underlying question was that, okay, so ODM is doing this thing. It's having an NDC, it's having an SNDC, there's a parallel NDC going on. And as a result of that, certain decisions were made. And then we went on into the weekend and we had this mammoth rally in Mombasa. And I heard a question from two people. And it was, why does this matter?
Well, it matters.
Okay.
By the way, let me wish ODM well from where I see that.
So there was an analogy of a giraffe before you came,
Correct.
Prof. And I just want to give you the picture, and then maybe this can help your question or rather answer. If you were shown a picture of a long-necked animal in the bush with little horns and long eyelashes, what would you imagine that animal was?
Well, definitely anything with a long neck is either a giraffe or that animal in Latin America, South America. These are the only two animals.
So when you look at this thing, you're sure it's a giraffe. It can't
if
be
it has a
anything
long
else.
neck,
All right.
it cannot be anything else.
Well, perhaps ODM is not what they're telling us it is. Please carry on.
But it can be something else.
Okay.
If you go by Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, it can be Moi.
Good one.
Yeah, that's what he told us. Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was a giraffe. So anyway, let's put it this way. I started by saying that our best wishes from the People's Liberation Party, which I belong to our brothers in ODM. What they are going through is essentially normal, because when the party leader is gone and there is no declared formidable candidate, political parties will either enter a moment of disarray, or they will actually collapse and fizzle out, and that is scientific. You can start with the Kano. Without Moi, it's gone. You can start with the Democratic Party. Without Kibaki, is gone. PNU is gone. NAC was gone, and NAC has now come back as PLP because of Mother Karua's candidacy and her profile as a party leader. Jubilee is struggling. With the coming of Matiang'i as a possible candidate, it is beginning to gain some traction. So it was expected that ODM would get into some trouble. But at the same time, the big question has always been, why do Kenyan parties, compared, let's say, to the Chinese Communist Party or the South African, ANC, or Tanzania's CCM, why do our parties crumble?
Right.
They crumble because they are special purpose vehicles, which are packed immediately. The leader is elected or is not elected and has no ambition. That's one. But the unique part about the Kenyan, parties, which I think is unique to Kenya, is ODM, because it has survived the longest.
Okay.
But its leader was always a candidate for 5 consecutive times.
Yeah.
He was a
25
candidate.
years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So ODM from its birth survived. But there's something else. because there were other parties that were formed at the same time Raila Odinga was forming his party, which did not survive. In fact, KANU was there with Uhuru Kenyatta, and others went on to collapse. Kenyatta became a candidate and with another party, not KANU.
Yes.
Why did ODM survive? Because of Raila's genius. Raila understood the timetable of elections and what to behave in each moment.
Correct.
During the election, he would fight tooth and nail to win the elections.
Correct.
But immediately the election is over, he would switch to the governing phase.
Correct.
And the governing phase is the time when resources are coming from the state.
Interesting, true.
And therefore, he would engineer this, kind of post-election anxiety, upheaval, whatever, to force a power sharing so that he has, in whichever form, his party is in the government.
Right.
And that is why ODM survived for so long. But if you listen to his lawyer, Paul Mwangi,
right,
and I agree 100% with his sentiments,
right,
he argues that Raila did not get into the government, the coalition government, whether it's that of Moi, it is that of Uhuru Kenyatta, or now William Ruto, without an exit strategy.
correct.
And it is the exit strategy that enabled him to be a candidate every year, and at the same time to be, to be in the government that comes after the election.
Right.
How did that happen? Because he'd always polarize his party deliberately between the moderates and the radicals.
Correct.
And the moderates would get into the government.
Correct.
Sometimes a few militants or radicals like Orengo, Nyang and others would also fight their way into the government. But largely, when you look at his response to the government of William Ruto, this was even sharper. That
Exactly.
His exit was essentially Sifuna, Babowino, and that whole group.
Right.
And that when he shifts, his party would shift. So he strengthened the two forces.
Right.
And because he was looking at 2027,
right,
and he never reached that time, then his greatest legacy to the party is disintegration.
Okay. Wow, Professor, well put. And today we are in the company of two great minds.
Yeah, so
Yes.
you need to be careful when you say Professor, which one?
Which one I'm referring to? So we could even refer to them as institutes. The Institute of Kagwanja, the Institute of Omenya. Well,
right,
having said that, we're in the Easter festive season.
right,
And we saw the death of Christ
Yeah.
changed the structure we have around religion and following.
yes,
Some argue he was the greatest activist who ever lived.
right,
And but you see, if his body was to be found today,
Right.
that story would change.
yes,
So we put that aside. Then we come many years later. We look at the demise of the enigma, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga. So the death of Christ gave birth to a revolution around the world.
yes, correct.
But what would we say the death of Raila Odinga has given birth to, politically speaking?
Right.
Because as you rightly put it, he has always been a contender in the last 5 elections.
Correct.
And actually, he had grown to become the agenda of any election.
Right.
Because people were coming out to vote for or
Correct.
against Raila Odinga.
Right.
It did not matter what the manifesto
Correct.
said about
Correct.
the other candidates.
Correct.
But here we are served with the absence of his commanding presence.
Right.
He was the binding force of the ODM.
Right.
Some argue he was the embodiment of the party. He was the party and the party was him.
Yes.
Now he has gone. What are we being served to? Because now
Yes.
there is no saying I'm going to vote for Raila Odinga
Yes.
or against Raila Odinga.
Right.
The definitions of how we are approaching the election must change.
Right.
His house by itself as ODM needs to find a direction and say,
Right.
this is what we are.
Yeah.
Because we know parties don't stand for anything. It is the party leader who defines
Right.
what that anything is.
Right.
But what has the death of Raila Odinga given birth to politically?
I think it's interesting. This one is very, very interesting because I didn't look at it from that perspective until you asked the question. Yeah, because here is somebody who has passed on. I mean, I think now we are heading to the 5th or 6th month, and I think the first politician. I'm even thinking about his own father, and the politics is still about him. What are we discussing here? We're still discussing Raila's approach to politics. We are still discussing Raila's approach to government and so on, and And this is quite interesting that just like you're saying about Christ, that Raila might actually define Kenya's politics way beyond his death. Of course, ODM becomes a pretty interesting theater in that regard. That if you look at it, all those children of ODM and surrogates, they all claim to be pushing their father's legacy, but in different directions.
Yes.
and just building on what Peter was saying, I think that was Raila's political genius. That he sees a physical, abrasive son, and he has a terrible neighbor. This guy fights with the neighbor outside there, and other siblings are trying to stop the guy, and Raila says, "Are you sure I'm not the one who sent him?" And the son is there. Then he sees a peaceful one who's praying in the church, and he's trying to convert people from Legio Maria, and others come to report that your brother is doing 1, 2, 3, 4 things, and Raila will be saying, even the bishop is a very good friend, so he sort of has all these guys in his group, pushing for radically different agendas, apparently radically different agendas, and yet they're sort of welcome. As I was coming, I was just reflecting. I mean, if you look at this Sifuna group, right from the start, these guys never supported the broad-based, even when Raila was around. We are making it appear that the guys are now trying to do something different now that Raila is not there, to sort of hijack the party or something like that. But that's not true. In fact, very many times, Raila had to tell people that, no, when Sifuna is speaking, I'm the one speaking. When Sifuna was seen to have been totally against the broad-based government. And I don't think, to be fair to that gentleman, I don't think his position has ever changed.
I think if we even look at the day the broad-based agreement was signed at KICC, Edwin Sifuna, and I actually, on that day when he said that, and I texted him and I asked him, I said, do you know what you've just said? He said, I am speaking in my capacity as the Secretary General of ODM. And not as Edwin Sifuna. He said those words.
Correct.
So he gave an inclination into what his position was.
Correct.
If anybody was listening.
Exactly.
At that time.
Correct.
So he's not swayed too far off, is what you are saying, from his original position.
Exactly.
So we should not be surprised?
And no, in fact, I think this is what makes it very exciting. Because, again, now we're still talking about the same Raila. Raila himself kept saying that they had only lent experts to the UDA government. And he said that over and over again. There is no point where Raila said that now we ODM are in government. In fact, if you see that, this is a narrative that's actually being pushed by another group of siblings who actually now want to be fully there. But again, to be fair to the enigma, he was quite clear that they had lent 4 experts, 4, and it was very specific to the UDA government. But again, now to agree with Prof here, this is what was fascinating about Raila's politics, that he was actually able to, and using different models. His model was never one. He was actually able to have conversations with the government of the day, and be able to have conversations with very, very important constituencies of the day. In this instance, it was the people themselves. Because again, if you check the build-up to this, we had the Sufuria movement. That was basically an ODM thing, fighting for the economy and so on. That was before the fallout with Rigathi. Then we end up with the Gen Z revolution. And the Gen Z revolution was basically pushing for exactly the same thing Raila was pushing for. Then Raila comes on this other side and basically they end up with the so-called experts lent to the Ruto government and says it's important to stabilize the country. I remember him saying those things, that what do you expect the country to happen? But on the other hand, we knew Raila. And we knew that his spirit was still with this Gen Z revolution and so on. And I think that is now what the Sifuna faction were able to do inside of ODM. That they were able to connect directly with the people, connect directly with the popular movements and so on. And then on the other hand, initially it was just the 4. the four were then able to negotiate for resources within government. Now, what has happened is that a number of people now have sort of expanded the space of the four to claim that it was the overall space of ODM, that everybody in ODM was meant to have been there. I think, so that is interesting. The last point I want to highlight on this one is the Odingas themselves, because we never actually saw any fights within the Odinga family when Raila was there anyway. So I think that was very interesting, because they're a relatively political family, but sort of Raila again was able to offer leadership as a sibling there, and all within the party. We had the Mbadi group in government. We had the Odingas enjoying whatever they're enjoying in East African community, and Oburu in Senate quietly there, and so on. Then, of course, we had this Sifuna group and stuff. Exit Raila. Now, the family itself really has an issue. We are seeing Oburu trying to contain them. We are seeing Winnie jumping from one faction to the other. We are seeing the mother in UNEP and so on. So basically, I think the only thing that's happening is that we really don't have that central figure that then ties all these apparently conflicting positions. That figure was Raila, actually. And that figure cannot be replicated, really.
Yes, I want to disagree with you. That figure was not Raila.
Yes.
If you engage closely with a critical mind with Raila's politics,
yes,
I served as his CEO for the Constitution. It was him and Kibaki were leading the constitutional process, and I remember I would report to him every day, particularly when he got ill and was confined to Nairobi Hospital. So whenever possible, every morning I had to go and brief him about what the strategy we are going to do and so on. Then during the Azimio, I came back. And I was in his party, and I was one of the so-called brain trust.
Yes,
with his brother.
Yes,
and Tuju and my brother Adam Zolo. So we're part of the brain trust.
Yes.
Now, and from time to time, he would call me, and or I would go to his place and for just a quick discussion. Nothing major. One constant figure in Raila's, life. Was Ida Odinga.
Interesting, yeah.
And in one of the sittings, I listened to her, talking about her life and that of Raila from Mamraka Halls in Nairobi, at the Nairobi University. Very deeply intellectual.
Right.
Very, very consistent.
Right.
And even if you remember her handing over of Raila to the Kenyans. I and the family have released Raila.
I remember that one.
Yeah, and this was very constant. Even in 2012, when she was an antagonist to us, under Kibaki, I remember that her speech that time ahead of the election 2007 that turned out to be very chaotic. I think the main differences would be, to me, between her and Oburu. This is it. And she's a taller, stronger, more unifying figure, because she understands who Raila was and how he worked. And let me hazard, because I'm a Kenyan and I can speak for myself and for the Republic sometimes. I think what we have not seen now is the Ida moment. And the Ida moment, to me, is very, very close to the Namibia moment.
Yes.
Where we have, president who is a lady.
Yes.
And the Ida moment can even be more complicated, almost mirroring Namibia. If Ida teams up with her friend, Mother Karua.
Yes.
And we have two giant female leaders in our country, and that will galvanize our politics. And that leads me to the question: might that be the reason why Ida is being exiled to the UN, to the UN corridors of power, rather than being around to be a free player?
That is true.
This is so. Look at Ida, Orengo, and
Right.
Anyang.
Right.
Now, together with the Sifuna
Right.
and Babu,
And we're inclined to that side.
That is a movement. You can now move that to this other side of the united opposition, and you have a perfect 2002 moment.
Very true.
And the country changes.
Very, very
Now,
true.
so I think we are focusing on saying, we need all this. I think the big thing we have not thought about and we have not invested in thinking is the Ida moment, as the heir to Raila Odinga. Because Raila Odinga himself listened only to one person, Ida Odinga. And Ida was also the leader of the father of Raila. She's the single constant figure in the Odinga dynasty. The single constant figure. That's why you find that immediately Raila passed on, the first target of attack in terms of character assassination and smearing of her family was essentially Ida. Why? Because she's the straight and direct and deserving heir to Raila Odinga.
So I hear you say, because there have been many things that have been said in terms of narratives here, and I think can contribute to this, is that number one, that there was an external hand in the deconstruction of the ODM party.
Yes.
And that if that's the case, then that there were deliberate and intentional activities to ensure that the ODM party was broken down into pieces that were then unrecoverable later.
Right.
And that the individuals then who would have been responsible for keeping this party as one were then given new shiny toys to play with.
Right.
And we can see this happening.
Yes.
If that's go give Ida Odinga a big UN job to be busy with for the next couple of I don't know how many years. And then make sure that the principles, as it were, who would move forward an agenda have then been removed.
Exactly.
So again, we go back to the giraffe in the forest kind of thing.
Correct.
Everybody's saying that the party is still intact, but we can see that there's something else going. Is there an external hand in all of this to ensure that possibly the longest serving party with the agenda over the last 25 years then has been reduced to almost nothing?
Yeah, but if you look at it, I mean, immediately Raila passes on, and now I'm speaking as an ODM member. We are told that Dr. Buru, Honorable Dr. Buru, would come in and be a sort of caretaker party leader.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, playing on African cultures and heritage and all those sort of things. That during death periods, generally what happens is that you basically get the next person by order of birth, to oversee that particular ceremony. That's how it's normally done. So I mean, if your oldest uncle alive is the one who will take over, who will chair, not necessarily take over, who will chair during that transition. Okay. You don't install a leader during that transition. In fact, for some cultures, it's at the end of that morning that then a leader is installed within the family. So all of us have been waiting for this moment when the real ODM leader would be installed. Because for us,
that moment was to be Friday.
Exactly. And because as far as we're concerned, Oburu was to actually lead us through the morning period based on the African cultures and so on. Because we know for a fact that there are very many factors, including age, that may not actually work for Oburu in terms of driving the party agenda, in terms of campaigning vigorously across the country and so on. And the other day I was just looking at it.
But he's a youth.
He's
the youth leader.
Yeah,
he's a youth leader.
It is very interesting, and that also has a corollary in the African culture. Normally when somebody become quite old, they would basically refer to their grandchildren as their husband and mother and so on. That it was actually a way of saying, fine, I mean, I'm continuing my life through these people and so on. So definitely I look at Oburu's youthfulness in that regard. So I think that the fellow who imagines that the youthfulness means that he can run across the country, I think they've got it all wrong. The youthfulness simply means that he is in the life of these other generation and live through them. That was the proper African cultural position, and I think it's still whatever. But look at it as again. I was analyzing this. I was saying, this is actually sad because we have a team that is supporting in ODM that is supporting the president, the broad-based government, and basically you'd expect that this team is then campaigning for the president in Luo Nyanza specifically, because the president camped there for 1 week. But basically, it was the president campaigning for himself and for them. and partly, you compare that with the Tononoka group. These guys do have, whether we like it or not, they do have the energy, they do have the presence, they can sustain rallies, across board. So what we're expecting was that this ceremonial leadership of Oburu was going to come to an end. But then I think those who are behind it, I think it is always, it is a problem with this country and with the leadership of the country that you put weak people or apparently weak people in position, believing that then you'll be able to manipulate them. But what I always tell people is that if you put weak people in position, unfortunately, you'll have to do the work that they're meant to have been doing.
Correct.
And I think this is the problem that UDA was not seeing. If anything, I would rather UDA work with the Sifuna group because they do have the energy, they do have the dynamics, they do have the work, and they'll do the work.
Allow me to ask, Professor.
Because currently, the president will do all the work of UDA, and if he's not careful, he might also have to do all the work of the faction that he devolved the work to,
allow me to ask,
within ODM.
Professors. Well, while all these dynamics are playing out, I'm hearing lack of political structures. Like political parties do not have organized structures that can oversee succession of leadership.
Right.
Because as you have rightly put it, we have not seen a political party go into two consecutive elections. There's always change. There's always a coalition. There's always change of leadership. Especially now with a death, then you realize there is a huge disarray. So that is one concern. Number two, these people that are being, as you say, exiled to other positions, and others are forming other functions to try and form various movements, they are not yet speaking to our national issues yet.
Correct.
Which I believe is a conversation every political party ought to be advancing, that people can start subscribing to the ideology of the party that you're trying to populate. The other thing is that Raila Odinga was retired by the Gen Z.
Correct.
They asked him to stay home.
Yes.
You have served this country well.
Yes.
This is the end. No further.
Right.
But he betrayed them when he went, according to their word, to form the broad-based government.
Right.
So even as ODM struggles to redefine itself, a lot of people do not have faith in that, because ODM was Baba and Baba was ODM, and the betrayal prevailed. So how do we balance all this lack of political party structures, lack of a national agenda where we could be saying this might be what we need 2027 or this is not what we need? How do we find the balance between building political parties or movements towards 2027 and sticking to the issue-based politics?
I think the place to start is, Karuti Kanyinga, the professor, who said very, in a very nuanced way, that Kenya is a country of minorities. And therefore, we are condemned or predestined all the time to form coalitions. Therefore, political parties are simply streams heading to major rivers. And that is our history, that is our tradition. When we were defining the constitution, we defined Kenya as a bi-party state, as a two-party state when it is governing, and a multi-party state when we are going through an election. Immediately the elections are over, we are a two-party state. That's the idea of 50% plus one, so that it will create a split. The minority and the majority, and that is now constituted in parliament during the governing phase. Now, if you get that in mind, then you get back now to the genius aspect of Raila Odinga. Because Raila Odinga knew when to take on baggage or extra burden and when to shed it off. That he knew very well. Before the elections, Raila would always come with these, tantalizing concepts about things. So whether you're talking about the orange movement, because that's what gave birth to ODM, the orange movement, or the NAC movement before that, right? And finally the CORD movement, or the NASA movement, right? And finally Azimio la Umoja. You know, all these are bodies that Raila would have been a champion before the election, because he knew ODM as ODM can never win a presidential election, because Kenya is a country of minorities and the Ruo can never get the presidency alone.
Right.
At the same time, you need to get the presidency within a very well crafted coalition, and therefore in 2027, if Raila was arrived, we were waiting to see a new coalition being formed, not Azimio, as my friend Karoli Omondi and others would tell me, because Azimio had run its course.
True.
Now, Gachagua is a big figure in Mount Kenya region. He was never in Azimio.
Yes.
He was in Kenya Kwanza.
Yeah.
So how do you tell him that he belongs to Azimio? He doesn't belong there. So in short, Raila Odinga would have now been thinking about what is the next movement that is going to take us to 2027. And therefore, you need to look at those things. Immediately after the election, the first person to betray the movement, the Azimio, Kenya Kwanza, and all that would be Raila. And that was the beef he had with Wetangula. It's the beef he had with Kalonzo. It's the beef he had with Mudavadi, his lifetime, buddies in terms of electoral politics. And it is actually the problem he had with Martha Karua immediately after the election, and why PLP left Azimio. We left because they felt betrayed, because that's not what we were fighting for during the election. So, in other words, you need to understand that as Raila. But picking from your earlier question about Jesus the activist,
Right.
and Jesus the legacy that we have now of the largest human movement, which you call Christianity today, is Raila, heading to that direction? He can and may not.
No.
Jesus himself did not leave a movement behind. In fact, he left a very desperate groups that were hanged. Some would be hanged heads down, others legs up, others would be roasted in oil. All of them were roasted. But there was one guy called Paul. Originally, I think he was called Saul.
Yes,
correct.
Who later was baptized or renamed, Paul. And this guy was a genius. He was a prolific writer.
Yes.
He was a very agile mover, moving from all the cities.
Correct.
Because he was a trader. He was a Jew, basically doing his business.
Correct.
But at the same time, limping his way into, communities and forming groups. And these are the groups that eventually converted the emperor of Rome, Constantine. And Constantine now gave birth to what we call Christianity in its bureaucratic form. But at the disciples level and followers level, already it had become a movement. Now, where is Paul for Raila Odinga? Of course, it's not Oburu. And I think the one message I can put here is we don't want old, people with some old people's baggages into the state house. We had it with the Kenyatta.
Yes.
We knew how costly it was. It cost us Boya, it cost us JM Karaoke, because every time everybody is thinking about succession. Because this person might follow any time. And politicians are politicians. They build, they write themselves into the future. So the assassinations that we got in the 60s and the 70s were all about Kenyatta succession. Even Moi, if you read the Kenyatta succession, where Moi himself was survived through the hair of his skin, of his teeth. Now, so that's that. So we don't want that. I served at Kibaki, and you could see towards the end how it can be difficult, particularly the younger civil servants who think they are stronger than others and who have more roots in the government. When you ask what is the center of an onion, it has so many layers until you go and find it's empty in the middle.
Yeah.
But you always think that there is a seed at the heart of the onion. So the civil servants, particularly the provincial administration, would always be kicking others out and in, and thinking we are more government than yourself.
And even as you say this, I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying, but then it seems as though there are two scenarios playing out here, where the people of Kenya, for whom political parties are established to ensure that certain ideologies are pushed through into practice. That's why they're there.
Yes.
That those people seem to be yearning, to be pushing, to say, can we have leadership that just gets things done?
Right.
Now, these machinations that we are seeing playing out right here seem to be the struggle for relevance in a place where the people of the country seem to be moving in a different direction. Can we reconcile the two? Because there's infighting in the party, that's for sure.
Right.
There seems to be one side that's saying, okay, hello, this party was formed to ensure that the people of Kenya can essentially get 1, 2, 3.
Right.
Can we not sway away from that? But there are others, the orphans now, Raila Odinga, who, for an argument of many, have the positions they do because they had the endorsement of Raila Odinga.
Correct.
In his absence, does that endorsement now disappear? And that's why we see the struggle to remain in those positions. What happens to the end all of this in the first place, whereby they said a party that was formed for social freedoms, social justice and democracy and things like this, and for the place of the people, they seem to be working in opposite directions. Can this be reconciled?
Actually, I think if I was a politician, this would be a really excellent opportunity, as it were. In the sense that I think our politics was headed one direction, and it reached a point where it was incestuous, where the politics was an end in itself, and the politics was about the politician. And we see that even currently in all these movements, it's all about the politicians and how they get into power, and we are seeing less conversations about what are these principles of governance that we must actually uphold as a country. What are these institutions of governance that we must actually have as a country moving forward? How do we govern, and for what purpose? What is the space of the people? That constitutional moment and constitutional discussion that we had, I think the political class has moved so far away from it that we seem to be interested just in two things: power for its own sake, and then trinkets. And these
shiny toys,
the shiny toys for the populace. And I do think that there's actually an excellent opportunity for forward-thinking politicians to build literally on some of these things that we're talking about. The other day, in fact, we had people talking about ODM being a social democratic party. I was like, yeah, actually, it used to be before you got these brainless characters whose only claim to fame is the positions they occupy in government, and that's what they take back to the people that look here. We have this particular position.
But you see,
yes.
Again, back to Raila Odinga.
Yes.
Now, I would say if you imagine an orchestra, that whole thing with all the instruments, jazz here, piano here, and so on. Raila was capable of organizing that orchestra, and therefore, in his party, being fair to him, there were what you can call bishops.
Yes.
People who are very straight and principled.
Yes.
They were intellectuals. Like Anyang and others. Yourself and others being there. I know Peter, Peter Ndege and Adams Law as really the staunch intellectuals of ODM. And those of us in PNU, under Kibaki, and later on at the Jumbiri, were really envying Raila's political capacity. The capacity to have all these groups. And in his group, he also had goons. Serious goons and charlatans. Yeah.
Yes,
Very serious goons and charlatans. You know, and who were high profile. I remember one of them was really giving us trouble during the Kibaki time. You know, until we thought we should exile this one out. You know, then finally you would have him having these business people. You know, Joe and Joey. You know, very corporate people.
Yeah.
Sobering.
Yes.
And you'd admire them. You know, he had that capacity to have that, to put that orchestra together. That is the orchestra that is lacking the what do you call him, the person who lead the whole
conductor.
The conductor.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the conductor is gone.
He's missing.
And
Correct.
the orchestra is in chaos.
Exactly.
You can't get anything going.
It's just guys
That's
playing
it.
drums.
And that,
it's the drums guys who are saying that the orchestra.
The orchestra. No, the big
the sax guys.
The big question now is,
Yes.
do we have anybody who is suitable to be the orchestra? I mean, the conductor,
Yeah.
replacing Raila as the conductor in this orchestra. And there are two people who are coming out.
Yes.
Obviously, Sifuna is to the extreme, but he seems to be more resonating with some majority of the younger, youthful generation. And even the older, I mean, like us, those who are in the mid-row, you know, to old, there. And as I said, and I want to conclude with this, the only person who can hold this orchestra together, the best conductor you can have for now, is Ida Odinga.
Now,
let me just you know, contribute to that. I think I'll just penning down a number of things that I think, you know, this institution we're talking about must actually deal with. Of course, we have the issue of the Gen Z and that entire movement. And what exactly were these people you know, looking for and looking at? We had the so-called digital activists, you know, that caused chaos in the region all the way till Tanzania and so on. We have those constituencies. We have this increasingly urban constituency, which Ruto had tapped into a little bit through his hustler. His hustler was not really the farmer. His hustler was the urban youth that we actually need to think about here. We have the middle class, basically that working class, whose pay slip has been raided big time, and is asking what is in this for us. And as you had put it, we have the future. 2027 is not our future. I think our future goes beyond that. You know, 2032. What happens to Kenya long term, and sort of. And there are a number of other really critical issues you can talk to. And I think that's partly why so far the opposition has not really been having that traction. No. Because they're not dealing with these issues. In fact, some of them were part of the problem that caused pains to some of these constituencies we're talking about. And ODM is also not talking to that. Of course, the current government, the UDA government, is the one that bore the brunt and one that caused quite a lot of these problems. Yeah, so I think this leadership that we're talking about must sort of take a step back. In fact, for me, it's post-Raila leadership. A lot of these issues are actually post-Raila issues. Yes. They're not issues that were central in Raila's time. No. Digital activism was coming towards the end of Raila. The youth movement was coming towards the end of Raila, and so on. In fact, Ruto himself, with his hustler bit, looking at the urban youths and so on, was almost, you know, pushing the boundaries beyond Raila. So Kenya is ripe for new visionary leadership, and it is not the Kalonzo Rigathi bit, and I think that's partly why people are starting to listen a little bit to this Sifuna group. So they do have an opportunity. They do have an opportunity to go beyond ODM, to go beyond Raila, to pick some of these issues, and it will work for them actually, because as it is, some of these issues and some of these constituencies are also their constituencies. Is the Nairobi youth we are talking about, who are the voters of Sifuna, who are the voters of Akina Babu and so on. So Kenya is actually ripe for a very fresh type of leadership, that goes beyond and I'm not talking about in terms of performance and even institutional building. I'm just talking about basic political issues.
Even
on the basic political issues that we need to be engaging on the table, we need a leadership that goes beyond Raila and goes beyond.
But that's where the problem. That's where we have a problem as intellectuals, you and me,
right?
Because we are not helping this community to think,
right?
Because we had this debate, exactly the same debate in 2002, and before that time. When we were talking about it's the time for the youth.
Yes.
And that's how, Uhuru Kenyatta rose to prominent as Kamwana, the youth, because that was the whole issue.
Yes.
And I remember Raila Odinga coming out and saying, no, there is a time for experience and skills and knowledge about governance.
Correct.
And there is also the question of age.
Correct.
So how do we come with an intergenerational leadership?
Right.
That doesn't get us through what Jubilee got us through.
Correct.
Where, part of what a grudge or a problem I have had with the Jubilee leadership, and by Jubilee leadership I mean from the time of Uhuru Kenyatta to William Ruto. Even now, we are in Jubilee too.
Yes.
If you begin to think about it.
Yeah.
The problem we have had is basically that naivety, that age is a determinant of as a principle of occupying office. Age can never be a determinant.
Correct.
There must be something.
Exactly.
When we looked at Boyer, and so say he was eligible,
right?
You could look at Boyer and see how he's articulating issues.
Exactly.
When you looked at Pio Gamapinto, or you looked at J.M. Kariuki, they knew how they were young. They were in their 30s and 40s.
Yes.
Very, very early 40s.
Yes.
But JM knew how to articulate the Kikuyu problem because he had been detained, he had been a businessman, he had been a PA to the president, had been a minister, so he understood all these things.
Right.
So this is the question that we need to ask about the competence.
Look at even a basic thing of our neighbors here, Kikwete. It comes to mind. You see, Kikwete joined the CCM as a little youth.
Yes.
And by the time Kikwete was in his 20s, he had actually gone through the ranks and the system that was actually ready to be president in his 20s. In fact, I have to tell him, what people don't realize was that, Kikwete was prevailed upon to wait for 10 years. Yeah. And he was still a very young president. He was,
at that time.
He was still in his 40s.
We raise, professors,
is so it's about readiness.
When we talk,
you have 10 seconds to raise that.
Experience is not competence.
Yes.
So there has to be a convergence of ideas.
And experience is not age.
It's not age as well.
You can have a lot of experience as a young person.
Of ideas between what used to work, what is working now, and what will work in the future.
Yes.
A question I want to raise as we come to the top of the hour. Is Kenya ready for the real opposition, who are the people, to pick their own presidency and say, based on the issues we want addressed? Because we keep talking about the political parties and the structure and the leadership of the parties. But rarely are we having a conversation about what the country needs in terms of leadership and the issues we need to address. Might the people, the real opposition this regime is facing, in 2027 rise up and say, based on the issues we need addressed, this is the person we want to be our president?
I would go for the values, because the problem we have by 2022, I can tell you certainly, I had no doubt that William Ruto, with his rhetoric at that time, was one of the most experienced of the leaders we had. So you cannot fault William Ruto on the basis of not being experienced.
Yes, he was.
He had served even as a party, party secretary general. He has been to the cabinet for the longest time you can. He has been to parliament from 1997. And he was a deputy president for 10 years. So he had the experience. What is the problem with Kenya?
I think the Institute of Gwanja earlier this morning, thank you, Joe, established that this actually is important. It is important for us to have a conversation around, because it could very well chart the course of who the next, crop of leadership will be in Kenya. So it is important that we discuss it. The Institute of Omenya believes that, we should be raising this conversation beyond this squabble that's happening and towards what it actually needs to be. Joe, you had a question before we went, and we had just started to interrogate that. Repeat it for the purposes of our audience, please.
I was trying to look at the developing dynamics. All these things we keep talking about, the political parties and political leadership and the personalities therein. But we don't acknowledge the real opposition that this regime is facing is the people. So as we go to 2027, the question then arises, with the real opposition, the people, focus on the people who will be wanting to be president and say, based on the issues we want addressed, based on the agenda we have as a people, because we have a collapse of systems, of the public policy. This is the person we want as the president. Can the people get to have their own candidate this time around when we go to 2027?
Now, the whole system that we have is all about the people.
Yes, correct.
And therefore, the question therefore becomes, how do we get the people to make the right decision?
Right.
And that's why the instrument of political parties came up.
Correct.
Because you cannot fill the positions that are created by the Constitution without the political party.
Correct.
And if you do that, you find what I found in 2022, that the political party is the only one that can make you a leader. And if somebody says you cannot be a candidate, then your goose is cooked.
Right.
And therefore, the problem I have with the Gen Zs, for example, is that they have this esoteric thought that you can be in the leadership without being in the political formation.
Yes.
You have to mobilize politically in order to fill positions that are created by our Constitution.
Right.
That is the path to power. It's very well clear that you have to belong to a political party or form a political party. Now, you can bring change in society without necessarily being in a political party.
Correct.
And that means you form a movement.
Correct.
And the movement itself is brought together by ideas that you want to sell. For example, the multi-party movement in Kenya was about abolishing one-party state, having a new constitution, and bringing into being democracy, human rights, and a regime that is liberal. That was our agenda. Now, going to 2027, we have a problem because we are mixed up. We are confusing individuals with ideas and with the country's agenda. I said at the beginning of 2023 that William Ruto's greatest opposition will not be the opposition per se.
Correct.
It will be the economy.
Correct.
So it is Ruto versus the economy. And I say, if Ruto improves on the economy and people feel that they have hope in terms of the way the economy is going, he will have no opposition. That I had said. And that has not changed. In fact, the economy has become increasingly his greatest opposition. And it doesn't matter what you do. The opposition, unless the economic matters change, that's there. The other thing now that has come up, in addition to the economy as the opposition, are the issues about the credibility of the government. And that has called us to go back to the factory setting of the Republic of Kenya. What is our factory setting? And the factory setting here is that we are the people who want to see justice. We are the people who want to see equality. We are people who want to see prosperity, right? And we are people who want this country governed by merit.
And does it matter who delivers it? No. If you're dealing with, here you're saying people want prosperity, people want, securing of livelihoods, people want education, health, all of these things.
Yes.
Does it matter who the vanguard of that process is?
No, the party matters. That's why we are here today.
Let me just let me just chime in on this. That and Joe and Prof have spoken to it. That we are people. This is an amorphous mass. We are people, and these people need some sort of direction. They're sure that the direction they're heading is the wrong direction, and they need some sort of direction. So the question that Joe posed to us is that are people then able to then determine the leader that will give them that direction? And I think what you're grappling with is, and Peter is, I resonate with what Peter is actually saying here, that if you look at it, what the people need is leadership. And I was just here, checking whom a leader is generally. And we're saying this is somebody who's able to motivate and is able to influence and is able to then harness a group towards a common goal. So yes, it's possible that a leader can emerge just out of the blues. And that has happened. We're talking about Christ. Christ emerged just out of blues. And he was a leader. He was able to actually get this group towards a particular goal. But having said that, to take a people, especially in a political economic context, towards any direction requires that decisions are made. It requires that resources are harnessed. It requires that these people are organized in very complex ways. What I'm saying is that it requires an institution. And currently, whether we like it or not, that institution, as Prof has eloquently put it, is actually the political party or a movement. It's very, very difficult. Even if an individual sees this particular opportunity to guide the country, it's very difficult to do it outside of an institution. It becomes, even just organizing a rally, without a political party or a movement is impossible. Who are you? Who are these guys that will be working for, and so on? And again, we are emphasizing that was a fault with the Gen Z. The Gen Z movement was a movement that was ready for leadership, but then they were fighting leadership. And it's impossible for this amorphous group to push the agenda without a leader. But having said that, it doesn't mean that a leader does not. That a leader must come from a political formation, and this at all levels. Even within a family, you must have the family first before somebody can emerge there, who then picks the agenda of everyone and runs with it. Even in a corporation, even in our professional institutions, it's very difficult for anybody to come and tell us that, okay, fine, engineers will head this direction and so on. This fellow must sort of be running a farm. He must sort of be a member of an institution and so on. Otherwise, your noises become irrelevant. So whether we like it or not, yes, people can make the decision, but this decision for a leader will not depend on the people, because the people are not organized if they are not organized into institutions.
Just to add on what Professor is saying here, this is called the consortium of the two institutions.
And now we're collaborating.
You're about to ratify something.
You see,
right.
What we confuse is the movement, and I like the way you have titled today's debate. I really love it.
Right.
But because there are parties and there are movements.
Correct.
Now, the parties that bring change are parties that are a movement.
Exactly,
themselves.
Correct.
If a party is simply a bureaucratic structure, like the way we have UDA, or the way we had the Jubilee, it is irrelevant, because first and foremost, it does not inspire anybody, and it just becomes a bureaucracy. But when a party is fused to a movement, where a movement are ideas that are driving change,
they're emerging from the people, and
that's why ODM was such a wave. In 2007,
yes,
because it was a movement. KANU started off as a movement. It was not the bureaucratic structure of KANU that mattered. It was that it was a nationalist movement.
The spirit of
the spirit of fighting for freedom, fighting for the rights of people. Therefore, it identified with the nationalist movement. Now, when you came to NAC, NAC actually became a movement. And you could tell the Ambogabo. Anybody from any corner would define themselves. The Gen Z is a movement. Perfect movement. The challenge of a country, of a people, because that's where you started. The challenge that people find is how to now harness the movement into a political formation.
Exactly.
And if the movement remains a movement, then the country is in paralysis. It has now to get into a political party so that it can govern. That's why the ANC in South Africa, at the end of apartheid, the ANC was a movement.
For very many years.
For many years, it remained a movement. It was never what you can call a political party. But it wrote a pamphlet, which I love reading again and again, saying we are ready to govern. The question is, are the Gen Zs
ready to
form our movement today? And I want to see how powerful a movement they are. It's such a powerful movement, because we are not talking about the Gen Z per se. We are also talking about the late millennials. And those of us who sympathize with them. So it's a huge movement. In 2022, they did not vote. 8.1. They did not vote. Because for them, they had no reason to vote. They had not concretized themselves into a movement. By 2024, they are now concretized into a movement. Now they are on this Kadi you
Tupo
know,
kadi, yes, the registration.
Yeah,
yes.
the Kadi movement. They are already in it. The question is, will they be able to translate their movementism
Correct.
into political leadership?
Correct.
Are they ready to govern?
And so this is coming from
if they are not ready to govern, then they are wasting our time.
And are we saying that this is necessary because of the system in which Kenya currently operates is? Because what we are saying is that you need to collapse this inertia into a political party
Right.
in order to govern. So if that's to be the case, if people are saying, well, of what's on offer at the moment, we don't resonate with that, what happens?
Well, I was saying that this is the best opportunity
To create a new one?
Exactly, for forward-looking movements anyway. I mean, for forward-looking leaders. Because, as you're saying, the people need leaders. And then there are people on the other side who feel they can be leaders, but again, without an institution and so on. So just like we are saying here, some people say, oh, those guys are selfish, they hijacked the leadership. But that is what should happen. That actually people who think they can actually run with the issues that the people or the movements are generating should at least, start coming out and say, look here, we are the ones speaking for this.
Can I give a very real fear? A very real fear that is also backed by experience in Kenya is that when there is or has been a would-be leader, it's very possible that person is corruptible and has been corrupted.
Correct.
And has moved.
Correct.
So the fear then lies within folks who say, well, if we're going to name somebody, the chances of this person being taken over by the external party, the same external party that could possibly have thrown a cat among the pigeons to start this whole mess in the first place, is probably still involved in ensuring that any leader you have in the future then is corrupted. There are examples of that. This happened, or assassinated, or bought. They're very real examples of that having happened and not too far off in history. So folks are saying, well, yeah, you know what, we need to keep them guessing. If we're going to have a leader today, if we're going to have a political party, what we've done is that we've put the thing right on the chopping block and given somebody the opportunity to chop the head off. So how do you deal with those very real fears? How do you deal with those very real fears?
But remember, even that one requires leadership. There has to be a leadership that says, okay, fine, we shall not expose our leaders. We will actually operate underground. Like all underground movements. Underground movements actually do have leaders. It is only that they're saying, no, we are not going to declare whom our leaders are. But if you're saying you're leaderless, like the youth are saying, then you have a problem because you'll not be able to harness all these issues and energies in a particular direction. But it's okay. It's okay to, number one, it's okay to not expose your leaders. That's number one. Okay. Number two, it's okay also not to make a decision on your final leader. Remember, what you're talking about here is not, we're talking about corporate leadership. We are not talking about an individual as such. So you could, generally that, in this group, Prof here can be a leader, Joe can be a leader, might be our overall leader. We are all leaders. Omenya can be a leader, Ndu can be a leader, and so on. So we know that we're a group of peers, and we're saying, no, we shall not make that decision now. Because if we appoint Omenya now, he'll be called to State House and he'll be given a lot of money and he'll be confused. So we decided that for now, we are not making that decision. But then that's very different from saying that we are totally leaderless as it actually were. And I think all good organizations and institutions, that's a culture that they should actually cultivate, where at any point in time, you actually have a lot of possibilities. And I think the great one, again, we go back to ANC. ANC, because of the movement nature, had developed a whole group that could actually lead. And it reached a point that they didn't even have the spaces for those leaders in senior government positions. And that is how Cyril Ramaphosa, for example, were told, no, now you guys are going to lead in business. Tokyo Sexuale. They were told, you guys will lead in this area and this area. But when we need an ultimate leader, we can actually mobilize these guys overnight. We can tell you, come from the corporate sector, you know how the movement runs, and you're ready to be president. Just like we were talking earlier, where do people get this particular experience? You basically build them within the party, within all the structures and so on. But then you're saying, fine, now we know we have a lot of leaders who can actually rise to the plate on a very, very quick call, as it actually were. But on the other hand, then you position these people in all those different areas, so nobody is suspecting that the next president is actually going to be Peter.
The Gen Zs clearly state that they are well led.
Yes.
And their leader is the constitution of Kenya.
Yes.
They say that in spite of whoever we may choose as a person, one thing that has to be underlying and cut through and through is that there has to be the rule of law.
And
that must be upheld.
And rightly so.
Number two, all the successful liberations we've had as a country, the Mau Mau and the democratic move in the 90s, happened because the people embodied the spirit of what they wanted. The people said enough is enough. The people said we don't care. They did not say we want Matiba to be our president or Mwai Kibaki or somebody else. They just said we need space to decide who is going to be universal suffrage, who is going to be our leader. Right now, the country is saying that we're in an economic crisis. The Gen Z are feeling the wrath of it because they're the ones who are paying the heavy price now and in future. We are auctioning their future through odious debt and many other issues. So that's why they're very more agitated. They're saying, before you start telling us who wants to be a president, before this so-called now alternative government, they have moved from united opposition, the coalition of the deputies. Now they're calling themselves the united government, who keep saying they're going to sit in a boardroom and decide who is going to be a president. The Gen Zs are saying that is not the direction to go. We have a paradigm shift. We know that we, the people, there are some issues we are dealing with. And we don't want to bring in people who are going to sustain the same problem. Therefore, we must rise. The uprising continues. The revolution is about not just the person, but also the ideals of the nation. Chapter 6 talks about the character of the individual. Chapter 12 talks about how we manage our resources. That is what Gen Z are saying. This is the leadership.
And that's why they have traction. That's why people are listening to them. And that's why people have not characterized them as noisemakers and whatever. Because they have legitimate issues. Boniface Mwangi, if you sit down with him, if you sit down with some of the people that have, even in the media, I've shared platform with them. When you listen to them, you know this country has a future. It has a future because you are looking at the incoming leadership. But at this level, Gen Z is just a movement. Like the French Revolution, for example. I personally say, Gen Z is a revolution. And by the way, revolution are not change overnight. Sometimes they go even for 50 years or even 10 years. Now, the Gen Z are the continuation of Kenya's democratization movement. Because our democratic struggle did not give us the kind of leadership, except the 10 years of Kibaki that we had, which is why people keep on referring to the Kibaki period. Before and after, we didn't have something you can call a leadership to which would say this is the end of the revolution. So the second liberation is still continuing. But now it's taking what the people are calling the third liberation because issues are beginning to become increasingly economic. We have moved from the political problems. We have a new constitution. It has chapter 6 and all these provisions. But they are still in black and white, not in actual sense. So the realization of the foundation of Kenya that we wished for ourselves has not been realized. And that's what has given rise to the Gen Z movement. And the Gen Z revolution, as part of that whole democratic revolution in Kenya, cannot be actualized until that day you put a person who speaks to that vision in power. And you cannot put that person in power by simply declaring. There was a debate which was here, particularly in 2025, between the securocrats, the securocrats. I call them the securocrats. Securocrats are those who are in the security sector. And the bureaucrats who are now in office, and the Gen Zs. So there was that debate about how do you get, what they're saying, about Ruto must go. The Ruto must go debate itself was so resolved by Kenyans through a democratic thinking. When people say one term, people think the other side think that it is just about one term. No, it was an affirmation that Ruto was legitimately elected
Correct.
by the people. He got the vote.
Correct.
And therefore, he has the right as a citizen to finish his term.
To rule for
But then people said,
years, yeah.
then it must only be that term, no other term. And we said it's okay. It's one term.
Correct.
But he has to complete his term.
Correct.
The securocrats were saying, and they were right in saying so, that you cannot get Ruto out of office through this revolution unless he has done so egregious things that you have to look for ways of getting him out. And the fact that Parliament looked like it was too co-opted, particularly during this impeachment of Gachagua and others, looked like it is so much in one's hand that we are back to one-party state. And that is what was beginning to give some credibility to the Gen Z's call of going to State House and getting somebody out. But as Kenyans, we sobered up and said, we can wait up to 2027 and then declare one term. Now, the 2 terms and 3 terms and 4 terms, those are campaign rhetoric. But there was a very serious fundamental debate about the right of Ruto to complete his term, or if you want to get rid of him, you get him through the right channels, because the consequence of doing otherwise is very expensive. Why am I going through that route? It's because of the movement character of the Gen Z.
Correct.
The movement character of the Gen Z must be kept within the law itself. Because if it goes beyond the law, then it becomes a chaotic revolution.
Correct.
That's not going to get us anywhere. And therefore, some of the top Gen Z leadership, or those who are aspiring to be leaders, need to begin getting into the parties. And if you look at the political parties, let me talk about my own party, PLP. We have created a position of a president of the youth. President, not even the chair. It's the only position where we have a president and not a chair.
Right.
Why? Because this is the position where you mentor the youth.
Correct.
And they must also be given space to operate outside the party. They can have their conventions and their movements so that they begin to realize themselves. Why? Because working within the bureaucracy, we are going to limit the agenda of the movement. And we don't want to do that because the movement is our future. So, in short, we are saying, the Gen Z now need to invest in how to transform themselves into from a movement to a governing party.
Professor.
Yeah, I think this is very, very interesting, and it's something that we need to continue engaging with, and even the politicians must engage with it. One of the things I was thinking about was direct tickets in Raila's time in ODM.
Yes.
In many instances, Raila was able to convince a number of people that they've ran opinion polls. And that the opinion polls indicated that one person was actually more popular way more popular than the other, and was in the interest of the party, and this view that this person then becomes the candidate, fearing infiltration and stuff like that. My point is that the political class must not ignore, Joe, what you're saying there, must not ignore the popular sentiments on the ground. And here I give it to one Rigiji.
Yes.
You see, because the thing is that you go to the ground and you talk to people. Yeah. But then, you can be able to tell, as you're moving around, whether people resonate with your issues or whether there are some other issues. But as it were, now we even have science that you can actually use to test what it is that, what are these issues that people, that are dear, to people's hearts and so on.
Yeah.
And eventually this, if these guys want to be successful long term and also want to deal with the issues that we have on the country, it cannot be just you selling your issues to us.
Okay.
It cannot just be you telling us, I'll do this for you, I'll do this for you, I've done this for you, I've done this for you, I'm doing this for you, I'm doing this for you. I mean, I think there's a space in politics where you start asking that genuinely, what are the concerns of these people? And currently, I think UDA is not doing it. And currently, I think a section of ODM is not doing it. I don't even think Rigiji is doing it, but it's trying, and United Opposition is not doing it.
Yep.
We all these political parties need to go there and ask, what are the concerns of these Kenyans? It is in their interest. They can tap into it to get into power. But at the same time, they can provide a relevant leadership in the sense that they're helping people harness their issues, towards a broader goal as society.
Okay. My question is, and I think that will enable us to kind of wrap this up, is political parties in many jurisdictions, Kenya being one of them, are often, though we know what they should be doing, they're often vehicles for individuals, not necessarily party ideology.
Very true.
And too often we've seen that this process of political partyism has been bastardized by individuals who are looking for a position.
Correct.
We're using that same example to now say Kenyans must have a political party whereby an idea will then be shepherded.
Right.
And so there's a conflict in the minds of a lot who say today, this same thing that people have just, I can be sitting here today and I think, you know what? I'm the next guy. So what do I need to do? I need to register a political party.
Yes.
Me and my uncles and my 3 cousins. And some people in the village will say, yes, we're part of this party. We say yes. Then we go and we have a political party that I can be in contention. For whatever reason. And we are saying that we need Kenyans, again, to be boxed into that idea in order to have some things realized. So do you see the conflict? The conflict in the minds of people where we're saying political parties have been used and abused for the longest time. But we're still saying use that very same process to bring about the change that you're looking for. How do we deal with that paradox that lives in the minds of many people today?
Let's go to where we started. And that might be the genius of some of these characters that we're talking about. Is Easter. And we had a guy called Christ, Jesus Christ. And there were institutions. There were actually institutions. And Judaism was there. The temples were there. The Roman Empire was there doing all these different things and so on. And then Christ leads this movement. If you check the movement that Christ led, it was not an institution in the sense of organized religion. It was sets of principles that could apply regardless of which religion you are in. And I keep reminding people that Christ was actually a Judaist. He was not a Christian.
No.
And he said, look here, these principles matter regardless of your political party. Let me put it that way. That these are universal principles that you must love your neighbor. It doesn't matter whether you are a Jew or you are a Roman or whatever it is. So there are those principles. And this is the position that we're still taking. That we do have fundamental issues and fundamental principles, and things that must be dealt with as Kenyans, regardless of the political formation. So this whole idea that these principles and issues that we must deal, like rule of law, those things, and we're shifting the economy and so on. Those are things that can be dealt with regardless of the political formation. Thou shalt not kill. Wasn't just in the Bible. And we shall ask Matiangi, did you kill? And we shall ask Ruto, did you kill? Because the Bible says thou shalt not kill. It's a principle that we are going to follow regardless of the political formation that you're in. And this is the message you are passing to the politicians, that the issues that are fundamentally Kenyans regardless of the political formations. So if you intend to lead, you must be able to understand these issues from first principles, not from your political parties and formation. Then your political formations become a vehicle. They simply become a vehicle of realizing some of this. Just like the church was established by Paul to become a vehicle of realizing a lot of the principles that Christ spoke about. But what is important is the principles themselves, is not the vehicle per se.
Prof, going back to Du's question about who we are now today and what's the problem with us. We have no problem with the principles because they are very well articulated in our constitution. And the Gen Zs are not calling for anything new. They are simply asking for the implementation of the letter of the constitution.
Very true.
But what is the problem with our political parties? Go back to 1976 and you find somebody called Mao Zedong or Mao Zedong in China. A very questionable guy. The people are poor. People are dying of hunger and so on. He has built this, liberated this country from the British and everybody else. China is free and a communist. But something is not working.
Yes, correct.
But now he has built a party that is at the same time a movement.
Yes, correct.
So the question was, which idea is going to galvanize this movement into the future?
Yes.
He passes on.
Correct.
And he's succeeded by another guy called Deng Xiaoping.
Correct.
And Deng Xiaoping says, this damn thing is not working.
Yes, correct.
But we're not going to destroy it. What we do, we go by stages.
Correct.
So he starts with something called industrial parks.
Right.
And declare some certain cities as experiments for capitalism. Because they are supposed to be communist and so on. And after 1978 to date, China has become a superpower.
Correct.
With the same party.
Correct.
But different leaders. They are now their fourth president.
Correct.
Right? This
what changes the idea? Yes, correct.
Xi Jinping is, I think, the fourth president.
Yes.
And we've seen how they are moving.
Yeah.
Now, why are we not able to do the same ourselves?
Right.
Why? One, because parties, some parties are briefcase parties that only come during the elections.
Special purpose.
To sell, to sell their companies.
Yes.
That sell membership.
The sell positions
so
of
that
memberships,
people can vie. That's one, their companies. The others are family corporations.
Yes.
That's what ODM was.
Correct. Yeah.
Face it. That's what Jubilee is. Let's face it. That's what Kano is.
Right.
Kalonzo has at least moved a little bit. It is more of it's a Kamba thing. That's how it is. Now let's face it.
One should beyond the family.
It goes right to go beyond the family, but it's still a Kalonzo picture. He's the one who thinks whether it is blue or yellow or green.
Yes.
The color that appeals to me at one season is what it goes to. No, so we have to move from there, from what we have now as either family-based,
right,
or individual-based
correct,
political parties to national political parties.
Right.
The registrar of political parties is struggling a lot, putting a lot of requirements. I think we spent the whole of weekend with the mother trying to align our own party to what the registrar of political parties want. And we have the whole idea of a party that lives beyond us, that can be a heritage. But the problem is parties have become business vehicles.
Unfortunately.
They have also become, vehicles for people to assert themselves, particularly those who have money. And because it is very difficult to bring up a party, that's a movement. We are looking to the Gen Z now. If the Gen Z came up with a party that is a heir to their movement, that perhaps can take us into the future. Currently, we are on what you can call cul-de-sac.
End of the road.
Dead end. The old is dead or is dying, and the new is not born.
Correct. True.
So we are trapped there in between. So to me, it's an appeal to the leadership.
Yeah.
The Uhuru Kenyatta, William Ruto, Raila, the Odinga family, and others, to liberate these parties and allow them to be national parties.
Exactly.
Don't cling to them as individual parties.
Correct.
Because we are not going to go anywhere. Conclusion, you can never be a superpower. You can never be a superpower without a strong political party.
The Gen Zs are saying to all those old politicians and old parties that have been in existence that they will not believe. That is the phrase. They will not believe. Because, as you have rightly put it, they are family business.
Yes.
They are briefcase parties. That's where the hesitation of the Gen Zs joining is coming from.
Correct.
Yeah.
So they're saying they will not believe.
Correct.
And I think it's a conversation worth continuing to have in time, because again, in the greatness of time, more will be revealed. More will be revealed.
And George, as we're winding up, this is a significant Kenyan problem. It is in the church, where we have briefcase churches, if you can call them that. The church belongs to the bishop.
Yes.
This thing is happening in business.
Yes.
Where very decent businesses collapse overnight in Kenya. I mean, we saw that with Nakumat, we saw that with Tuskys, we saw that whatever. This is happening everywhere. And what I'm saying is that, the appeal to Kenyans. The only ones that are surviving are those banking corporations and so on. And if you look at them, a lot of them were Western established institutions.
Yes.
My appeal to Kenyans is that can we build institutions that go beyond us?
Yeah.
Really.
There you go.
Good note.
Institutions cannot just be our vehicles.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A good note to end on at this point. And thank you for being gracious enough to stay with us to have this conversation this morning, because many things came out that could then be, that are, not could be, food for thought in terms of the next actions that Kenyans will take. We want to thank you both for being here with us this morning. Professor Alfred Omenya for joining us, and Professor the Institute. And Professor Peter Kagwanja. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much for these important morsels that we have to share in this morning. Asante. And we continue with the conversation.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.